together with American Songwriter, we had the opportunity to talk to Brendan B. Brown of Wheatus from the Soda Bar in San Diego. This is one of the very, very early interviews that we did. We met Brendan at a bar in San Diego called the Soda Bar. He was performing with Mike Doty, who we've also had on the show. You could check out that interview. That one was over Zoom during the pandemic. This interview was recorded pre-coronavirus. He tells us the entire story of how he got into music, forming Wheatus, the success of Teenage Dirtbag, and everything else in between. Make sure to check out our prior videos and interviews on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. You can find that Mike Doty interview there, as well as hundreds upon hundreds of others. And it would be awesome if you follow us on Instagram and Twitter as well at BringingBackPod.
We'd appreciate your support if you follow and subscribe to our podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts.
We're bringing it backwards with Brendan B. Brown of Wheatus.
All right. We're here with Brendan of the band Wheatus, and super huge fan of you guys. Have been for a long time, and we thank you so much for doing this with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you were born in the East Coast, correct?
Yes.
Grew up in Newport, New York?
Northport.
Northport.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't read my own writing.
That's okay.
Northport.
Neither can I.
Northport, New York.
Yes.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
So you want to tell me a little bit about growing up there?
Northport, my parents moved there in 1975.
Okay.
Between 73 and 75, I think. It was sort of a lobster town on the decline.
Oh, yeah?
It's a seaside village on the north shore of Long Island in Suffolk County.
Okay.
Which is the easternmost county. It's about, on a good day in the middle of the night, it's about 55 minutes from Brooklyn.
Wow.
Or New York City proper.
Okay.
The center of the city. And on a bad day, it's like 3 hours away.
Right. So you're fairly close to, given a good day, you're fairly close to New York. There.
Yeah,
New York,
we
Manhattan.
grew up sort of like as early as maybe when I was 7 or 8 years old. I remember maybe even 6 years old going in and out of the city with my parents.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a wedding at one point in, I think, Windows on the World, in the World Trade Center.
Wow.
When I was a little kid, real little kid. Yeah, so New York City was a part of life early on.
Sure. And growing up, because you were so close to New York, was that which gave you some influence for wanting to start music? Like, who were your greatest influencers when you were growing up as a kid?
Or very early on, I think my mother says that when I was two or three, I was like singing "Mac the Knife" by Bobby Darin in the mirror.
Oh, wow.
And I thought it was about Jaws because I was obsessed with the film.
It is a great film.
When I was a kid. So my sort of cultural and vibe influence is somewhere between the integration and hip-hop and punk rock culture of New York City and the sort of New England-y fisherman culture of Long Island.
Sure.
And Northport, growing up, you asked, I should tell you, it was quite a violent place. I was in more fistfights than I could count by the time I was 8 or 9 years old. Yeah. So it was like that, you know.
How close is that to Staten Island or?
It's it would be considered very similar in terms of its culture and demographic and all that. Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking because you said hip hop influence, Wu-Tang and all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So I remember my earliest memories of hip hop are Public Enemy and LL Cool J.
Okay.
And to be honest, I can't really remember how I found out about those things, but it was local.
Sure.
It will have been tapes passed around. Just because, Public Enemy were from Roosevelt.
Uh-huh.
Roosevelt was 10 minutes away from my high school because I commuted to high school on the Long Island Railroad. So I went to a boys' school that was about an hour away from, or 45 minutes by car sometimes, but it was about an hour and 15-minute train ride from my family home.
So you, as a kid, would leave your house and get on a train to
Starting
go to
at the
school?
age of 13,
Oh my
I got on
gosh.
a train and commuted back and forth to high school with other New York commuters who were headed into the city.
Oh, wow. So it's
So-
not just for... This isn't a train that's just taking kids to school. This
Oh,
is
no,
just
it's
like
the Long Island
major
Railroad.
train.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so the whole concept of public transportation and getting around, I knew how to do that when I was 13.
Yeah, you learned quickly.
I learned that very quickly. I learned which direction was east, which was west, which direction the city was in, what the little towns were along the way, where not to get off,
Sure.
and so on. So it was very much like a New York City commuter learning experience, or at the very least, a sort of immediate suburban commuter experience growing up.
Okay. And, well, growing up, how did you first start getting into music then?
My mother played the guitar.
Okay.
My father played the drums, and they weren't professionals.
But still, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was their hobby side.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know how I got into music. That's really tough. I remember Sha Na Na being like a big deal from the movie Grease, perhaps.
Yeah.
And went to see them. My family took me to see them at Radio City Music Hall when I was like real little.
Oh, cool. Was that like your first concert that you ever went
That was my
to?
very first concert.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And then the very first concert I went to without my parents was AC/DC at Madison Square Garden.
Oh, wow.
And that was December of 87. I was 13.
Okay.
Or had just turned 14. 13, 14? I can't remember. Yeah.
13 or 14.
Yeah, 13 or 14. No, I think I had just turned 14.
Okay. And
Yeah.
you took the train out there and did it on your own?
Took the train into Manhattan with some older kids.
Okay.
Not that was sometimes your parents would be like, "Oh, there's older kids going, okay."
Yeah,
And it was
yeah,
like,
sure,
that's,
okay.
That's not better, Mom.
Yeah.
You know,
They'll babysit you.
It just got into. Well, Penn Station was easy because it's underneath the basement of Madison Square Garden.
Okay.
So you can't really screw it up.
So you can just get off there and get out.
Right.
Okay.
But it was New York City in 1987.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was still, it hadn't become Disneyland yet.
Yeah.
But I figured that out.
Okay.
And
Was like the music of AC/DC then? Did that?
I was
influence-
obsessed. I was so obsessed with AC/DC. I was
Sure.
Angus Young for Halloween 2 times in a row when I was 10 and 11.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was completely like over the moon about them. And what's funny about that is like we're talking I don't know 85, 86, 87. Those are the years when AC/DC was kind of like I don't say faded, but Malcolm was in rehab and they were making like the soundtrack for Who Made Who, the Stephen King film. Well, actually, it's called Maximum Overdrive, but the soundtrack album is called Who Made Who.
Okay.
And they were hard to find. Like they weren't on MTV all the time.
Sure.
And there was very little video footage of them performing. And Bon Scott had died before I really understood what they were or who they were. So it was at the age of 10, I had this like tape case full of AC/DC.
That's so cool.
And I was riding my bike around town and sort of forensically investigating them, like where are they from? And then this fortunate thing happened where my parents rented a room to a woman from Australia, and I knew that they had albums. I don't know how I knew this, but I think some old dude at a record store told me they have a bunch of albums that came out in Australia that are not out here.
Oh,
And it
okay.
was like, I need that.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
So she, on a trip home to Australia, this woman called Lou picked up a few
Few
records that
for you?
had never been released in the States, and I was like,
So you had some imports.
I was 11 years old with AC/DC bootlegs and imports.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And shortly after that, I got into Rush. And I don't know if you did any research about this, but when I was 10 years old, there was a murder in my town.
No, I didn't hear about this.
This sort of somewhat notable satanic panic case from the 80s. The first of them, really.
Wow.
It was a kid named Ricky Casso who he and his buddy Jimmy Troiano lured their friend Gary into the woods and stabbed him to death.
Oh my gosh.
And it was all kind of like immersed in this Satan cult thing that they were saying. It happened like almost like right behind my house, like 2 blocks behind my house.
Wow.
But the big part of the story is Ricky got arrested wearing an AC/DC shirt.
Oh.
And I had it was all I listened to at the time.
Sure.
So it became this parents, teachers, clergy descended upon.
Yeah, that was when it became Antichrist Devil Children?
Really weird.
Yeah.
And it was like, no, it's alternate current, direct current, you idiots. But
you could swear.
Yeah. Like I was really even then I knew that I was like I didn't understand fully the concept of hypocrisy and blame shift and all that stuff, but somehow I knew it wasn't Angus's fault.
Right.
And it was this weird time. That was the moment of, if you're a dirtbag, you're like Ricky Casso.
Okay.
And if you're not, you're like this clean kid who does everything right and so on and so forth. And it was like real dichotomy, like binary, suburban nonsense. And that alienated me pretty hard from school people and stuff. And I developed I didn't know it at the time because, again, I wasn't exposed to punk rock, aside from this one kid who had a Crumbsuckers jacket. But I developed a sort of snotty punk rock attitude about things because of this, what smelled funny about the way the murder went down and what happened in the aftermath of the murder.
Yeah.
And 3 years later, when I went to high school, that was still hardcore. Like, are you a dirtbag?
Oh, so at this point, because if you're wearing an AC/DC shirt, then people are just associating you.
Oh
with
yeah.
The whole,
oh yes. Very much so.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
It was ground zero for, like the whole where the Tipper Gore PMRC thing came from, and yeah.
Wow. And when you're in high school, then are you still wearing AC/DC t-shirts?
Hell yeah.
Okay.
yeah. It just became contraband and something to be even a little bit more proud of, and sort
right.
of,
because you knew the true story behind it, and then people are gonna judge you. It's like, later in the 90s, if kids were wearing Marilyn Manson t-shirts, it's like, oh my god.
Yeah, that same kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah.
But mass media back in the 80s was sort of like, if the New York Post wrote an article about there being a Satan cult in Northport, that stayed.
Yeah.
There wasn't no 24-hour news cycle where it went away. It's like the next week the New York Post ran it in this the
They're
Sunday
still talking
section.
about
Yeah,
it.
it was like everyone was like, "What's going on out there?"
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, and when I got to high school, that reputation kind of followed me around a little bit, or it must have followed everybody who was from Northport around. But I remember my second week of my freshman year in high school, this upperclassman comes up behind me and near the lockers, and he's like, "Yo," and I'm like, "Oh man, here it comes,"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Can you get me?" What did he ask me for? He's like, "Can you get me mescaline?" I was like, he's like, "You're from Northport, right?" He's like, "Can you get me acid or mesc?" And I'm like, I'll ask around, man. Because there's a lot, this reputation of Northport had this drug place,
Mm-hmm.
And if you read the police report from the murder, these kids were routinely smoking tons of angel dust.
Oh,
and taking 10 hits of acid each, and
so they were just out of it.
Oh, they were gone, man.
Yeah.
They were like history.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so it was like that.
Yeah. In high school, is that when you started playing music and writing music?
So I played lots of sort of AC/DC records and stuff, and was into a lot of other things too. I was into I played along to Cyndi Lauper records and Graceland by Paul Simon, and Huey Lewis and the News, and like Pink Floyd record that came out at the time, which I think called The Delicate Sound of Thunder.
Okay.
Which some would say is not a real Pink Floyd record, but whatever.
Yeah.
This was just the stuff like I was playing guitar along to, and when I got to high school, you know, it was like a boys' school, and the commute was really long, and it, you know, I kind of got dubbed, for lack of a better term, quote unquote, a fag for going to like a boys' school far away and all that stuff. And so like the Northport kids didn't want anything to do with me anymore, and I would just come home and play guitar.
Okay.
So I like Saturdays and Sundays was like I had my special sweatpants and just like 13, 14, 15, pretty much all I did every weekend was play guitar.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And that was when I got into two other bands pretty heavily, Metallica and Rush.
Okay.
And all the while kind of still paying attention to Prince. I always found him really interesting. The production aesthetic on his records was a bit more mysterious. I wasn't sure how those sounds came to be.
Sure.
AC/DC rock guitar sound was like much more meat and potatoes. You could acquire that on any old practice amp close enough. Metallica was a little bit more complicated, and Rush got a lot more complicated. And that's where I began to get interested in the sounds of records, like that dovetail between, I've always been interested in Prince, and like that guitar sound on Raspberry Beret, that's not entirely unlike the sounds on the Presto record by Rush. Like there's some similarity there. And I started really getting in like scientific about that. Like
so you're listening more sonically to how this guitar sounds versus Prince's guitar.
So by the age late 15, early 16, I was really starting to pick apart why records sounded the way that they did, and not like having an allegiance to any fandom or style or anything like that. I just got really interested in the production aesthetic.
Okay.
And that stayed forever.
That's still part of you.
Still in that mode of like, how did Passion Pit get that synth sound? That's crazy. I want to know. I want to know how that happened, you know. So yeah, it's and that's really fun because it's this like ongoing mystery, you know. It's like
because
it's
everyone's
podcast
tweaking,
that never ends, you know.
Yeah, they're just tweaking things and going. Yeah, I mean, even back to the early Zeppelin records, how they got the drum tones,
exactly,
or how they recorded certain things. It all came down to these creative minds coming up with these different ways of recording stuff.
Yeah, and the guitar equipment that I saved up for and purchased was influenced by these things. I wound up. I remember probably it was like in 1989 when I was like 16 or 15, I bought a Digitech GSP 21, I think it was called, or DSP or GSP, I can't remember. It stands for Guitar Signal Processor or Digital Signal Processor 21.
Okay.
And it was like 100 different guitar sounds.
Wow.
That were saved digitally on this little box.
Okay.
And they were editable.
Oh.
So you could save new ones. And this was like, oh my God, you know, like it. So the very earliest digital signal processing for guitars that like the Edge was using.
Okay.
Well, actually, that's a lie. That shit goes back earlier to like Andy Summers using the Roland system. But that stuff was so top shelf pro that it wasn't available to regular idiots like me in the $150 to $250 price range that you could save up raking leaves. And then like that very first one that was available in the late 80s, I bought.
Okay.
And that just made everything different. That changed the whole world. It was like, oh, this is how this works. EQ, harmonic distortion, modulation, chorus, flangers, like ping pong stereo delays and stuff, like figuring out how all of that function. And one by one kind of retro engineering the sounds that you hear on records you like.
Okay, yeah.
And
so trying to mimic
them, yeah. And that was like a sort of a very rich like sophomore, junior, senior in high school, like ongoing, never-ending thing.
Yeah, so you'd go home and just mess around with that.
I was a tweaker. I was such a tweaker. And the first band that I joined, I used that rig.
Oh, okay.
When I got to college in 1991, I started college. And this was an interesting time because, like, Butch Vig produced some notable records at the time.
Sure. I mean, probably the most notable in 1991.
Sure.
Yeah. Never mind.
Well, he was using this sort of like throwaway stuff from the 80s still. He had mastered the technology of those boxes, that late 80s kind of stuff. Because the first grunge records, Nirvana, or if you're talking about Gish, Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah, Gish.
That stuff wasn't made on really big budgets. It was like let's keep it small.
That's kind of what the sound that grunge had out the gate.
Yeah, absolutely. So
raw, garagey.
Right. So
tones.
when I got to college, I was able to like look back a little bit and see, Fugazi, Kim Thale from Soundgarden, Jay Mascis and Husker Du and Bob Mould's techniques and what he used for his little toys. And it was cool because I had kind of like, even though it was available to me, the hair metal palettes of the time, I never found them appealing.
Really?
I had gotten really into AC/DC, and as far as like a core, like roots guitar sound, I didn't think it could be beat.
Sure.
I thought Metallica did really wonderful things with crunch and overdrive that were like I was fascinated by and wanted to delve into. And then Rush was like, better than U2 for like using effects.
Oh yeah.
So that none of that's hair metal.
No,
that's
not at all.
like carefully skirting the hair metal at the time. So I can't say that I didn't like Poison. I didn't like Warrant. I didn't like Winger. It wasn't because I was being hard or any of that. It's because the sounds didn't interest me.
Sure.
They were like boring. I was like, why would you do that when you can do like there's like the Cure guitar, the guitar sounds from the Cure. I was like, oh my god,
yeah,
how is he doing that? So and Johnny Marr as well.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting time to be a guitar player and to like everyone was using some kind of nude box.
Okay.
That was fun.
Yeah.
And you could write sounds with.
Yeah, because you could create your own
composing sounds. Yeah.
And so the first band that you started then when you were in college.
I didn't start it. I joined it.
Oh, you joined it.
Yeah. There was two guys in college who had been playing together for years in a hardcore band, and they were like rebranding.
Okay.
After their first like go at coming out of CB's Sunday matinee world.
Oh, wow.
Which I was too young for.
Okay.
So, like, with CB's matinee culture, those shows, if you were, like, 16, 15 years old in 1986, 87, I wasn't.
You were too young for that.
I was too young to go to CB's alone. CB's was on the Bowery, man.
Yeah.
Like, that was straight up a dangerous place to be in 1987 as a 13-year-old kid walking around the Bowery like, hey,
and to this, like,
and you couldn't get in.
Venue.
Like, they were all ages, but, like, 12, 13-year-olds, I don't know. I don't know if they actually let, like, Hilly Crystal was letting those little kids in there because it was, like, there was stabbings at that place and mosh pits and, like, it was
like true punk rock.
Hell yeah. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to play there starting the first CB show I ever did was I was 19.
Oh, wow.
And I played a Sunday, audition day, whatever.
Was that, like, mind-blowing that you got to,
it's the most nerve-wracking, mind-blowing thing,
venue,
and played there a handful of times afterwards with this hardcore band that I was in called Bandersnatch. I say hardcore, it was more like Long Island rockcore.
Okay.
Like, it's somewhat grunge influence, also very influenced by Primus and progressive rock and stuff like that. So that's what it was, more along those lines. Okay. And then we played a couple shows at CB's, and we played a couple more shows in the city.
All like New York, locally?
Under Acme, Brownies, Lion's Den, Kenny's Castaways, all those sort of like Bleecker Street clubs.
Sure.
I remember getting shows was such a. You got to show it. Oh my God, we got to show at Kenny's Castaways. Oh my God, this is so cool. And you invite all your friends down.
Try to draw your friends in, and
yeah, it was like a big deal. It was such a big deal to play in New York City. So I never played any shows on Long Island.
Okay.
Not once did I ever perform.
Wow.
In a club or at a high school show or anything like that. I went straight to the city.
Straight to the big time.
Yeah, right. And you know, at the time I was driving, like in college time of life, I was driving my grandmother's like decommissioned Mazda, and it was getting broken into every time I parked in the city, and like it was stealing my laundry bucket of coins and stuff. And I was basically living in this car. Wow. You know, I was in the University of Scranton, Pennsylvania, is about 2 hours away from Manhattan.
Okay.
To the northwest, and the Village Voice came out on a Tuesday, but Scranton got it on a Wednesday. So I started calling. I picked it up every day in the cafeteria in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I would call the ads and set up auditions on the weekend. So like freshman and sophomore year of college, I was driving down to Manhattan on the weekends to do auditions. And if it was too late to drive back to school, I just went to like a driveway of like a high school friend and parked in their parents' driveway and slept.
Oh my God.
And I got caught a couple of times, but they were like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Oh, I was too late to drive home." Well, I'm glad you didn't drive, you know.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, like that kind of stuff. So, but I wound up playing with some pretty like serious, cool like auditions, and I was way over my head, like.
And were you writing at this time? Or
I was writing tons and tons of weird guitar music and weird tunings. I was really into this band called Walt Mink, who are originally from McAllister College in Minnesota. Their first drummer is Joey Waronker, notably. John Kimbrough, their guitarist, is now, I believe, the producer for Tenacious D.
Wow.
And I think he's also their touring guitarist.
Okay.
But I was like following them around on the East Coast and like having like at the 21 and up shows, like having to sit at the stage door and listen, kind of like a drive 3 hours to Baltimore to see these guys play, and then like standing in an alley, you know. So like that was what like looking back on it now, I didn't feel like I could ever get enough music, but I was pretty obsessed. Like I was there, and I went into college, the pre-med program. I was in like the sciences.
So you were going to be a doctor?
Yeah. Like that, just because I was on some kind of weird conveyor belt that kids from my high school were on. Okay. College prep. You know, they put you on that assembly line. You never really find out what you want to do with your life. It's just like, this is what you need to do to make money.
Yeah, sure.
And I was doing both. I was like managing this like serious college sciences major.
Yeah, that must have been pretty difficult to juggle.
I didn't realize how difficult it was until I was like, why am I doing this? Like what the hell? Like all I ever do is music. It's all I've ever done. It's the only consistent thing in my entire life. Why am I? It's because you just like I didn't grow. My family, my mother and father were musicians, like hobby musicians, but they didn't know anybody in the music industry. They had no idea how any of that worked. I couldn't seek advice from them, or nor could they guide me in any meaningful way. It was just kind of like my dad's advice was like, have a backup plan. But the thing is, if you have a backup plan, you're going to wind up doing it. So
that's a good point.
Yeah. So like, he didn't know, and nobody around me knew. So I kind of just figured it out, the hard way. And, my little hardcore band broke up, and I joined a couple of other bands. I answered and the Village Voice for a band called Hope Factory. Okay. And this guy was really good. Ali Namvar was his name, still is. He's a friend of mine still. And he was the first person I ever met who had like a singular, unified, holistic vision of what kind of a band he was doing. Okay. He was like, he left nothing to chance. He was like, we're producing it like this kind of kick drum sound we're going to have. Some would say that's control freak. I disagree. I think that's just vision.
Yeah, he had a vision, and he knew how he wanted it to sound, and he was going to go that way no matter what.
Right, exactly. And in his band, I did not pick my own guitar sound. I did not pick my own pickup that I was playing the guitar on. I did not pick the type of amplifier. It was all his decision. Sure. And because he's when I answered the ad, he sold it to me as so completely whole I was like, you know what? I'm going to check this out. I'm going to see what it's like if somebody has a total picture of what they want to do.
Yeah.
So I followed his lead, and I learned so much. And we signed to Joan Jett's management company, and we did toured the East Coast with her a few times.
Wow.
When I was 22.
Wow.
So it was like,
so you're getting to open up for Joan Jett.
I had the real deal, like sleeping in the back of a van experience, starting at 21, 22 years old when I was in Hope Factory in 1996.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So how did was the guy that you're in the band with kind of the advocate as far as like how did you guys get picked up by her management?
Somebody knew somebody. I know what it was. You ready for this one?
Yes.
Remember when I told you my parents didn't know anybody in the music industry?
They knew Joan
Except
Jett.
the guy my dad sold a car to in Great Neck, New York, he said, this guy has something to do with music. Why don't you call him? And he gave me his business card. And I called Kenny Laguna, who wrote Sugar Sugar by the Archies.
Oh my gosh.
I had no idea.
Wow.
And I got in touch with him, and I sent him the demo, the Hope Factory demo.
Okay.
And he was like, yeah, this is all right. You can open up for Joan. You can come out.
Wow.
That's how we talk. And he was like, gave us a little chance, you know, like,
Sure.
And we didn't know at the time that it, you know, wasn't a big deal to him, but to us it was like,
Like, yeah, you
we're
just
fucking playing with Joan Jett and the
Oh
Black
my
Hearts, like
God,
holy
yeah.
shit, you know, and it was
people.
such.
Yeah, people to this day would shit if they heard that.
I would shit my pants every time I had to see her, man. Like, I still, if she walked in here right now, I'd be like, oh man, there's Joan. Shit, I can't talk to Joan. You know, I remember one time. She didn't like Rush too much, and we were like talking about who's our influence. I was like, I really like Rush. She's like, those fucking jerks. Like, oh man, I said the wrong thing.
Whoops.
So yeah, so you know, she was just like such a rock star to me. Still is. You know, I can't even. She's so cool. She's so tough and like just such a badass and very, very, very talented. I mean, never heard her sing a flat note once.
Wow.
And it was just standing side stage and watching her do it. It was like, I need to get really good. Like, she's really good. Oh my God, you know.
Did you learn anything from her when you're on tour?
Tons.
I mean, was she gracious enough to come and like talk to you guys? Watch
Yeah,
your
man.
sets
She
and
was
stuff?
she was like real sort of like, so Joan, you know, Joan came up in the toughest music industry I think there ever was.
Yeah.
And she's, you know, I mean, she's a fucking hard ass. Like she is tough. She's a tough girl.
Yeah.
And I always knew that and kind of had respect just because those songs are so tough, you know?
Yeah.
I really liked the song she did with Michael J. Fox, Light of Day. You ever
Okay.
hear that song?
Yeah.
That's a cool tune you should check out. It's like, I don't, you know, she did that live a couple times, but like, I think she thought we were just a bunch of fucking like doofy kids from Long Island. And she was right, you know?
Yeah.
But I learned so much from her.
That's so cool.
What I learned from her. I can't really couldn't write down in a manual.
Mm-hmm.
Something about her preparatory confidence.
Sure.
The way that she approached the show, she was really serious about it.
She had like a ritual before she played.
Yeah, and in the hardcore world, you know, there's a lot of like fratty kind of bro humor and stuff. And she kicked more ass than anybody I ever saw in a hardcore band, and she was not bro humor. She was like,
of course not.
She was like she was like serious. She's kind of thing like I remember one time I was like, she's eating a sandwich, right? And I was like, is that a veggie burger? And she's like, tell me you didn't come here to eat. You didn't come here to eat, right? And I'm like, no, Miss Jet, I did not. Going to practice my guitar right now, right? So it's like, it's just like priorities.
Yeah.
You know, like, what are you here for? Yeah.
That's
and I was just
amazing.
trying to make goofy small talk, like, I don't know what to talk about. You know, it's Joan Jett.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, the Hope Factory thing kind of unraveled a little bit, and I started working on this project called Mr. Jones with this. This was bad. This was the first thing I ever like really put my back into in terms of writing. Now, the whole time I had been writing the first album, right? Wheatus' first album.
Wheatus' first record.
I was cultivating all the guitar riffs. I had a 4-track and a bass and a drum machine. I had a $250 a month living room apartment in Queens, and I was like,
wow.
Where my room was like, one of the walls was a blanket. You know?
yeah. So you could soundproof it?
No, just like so we couldn't see each other. Like that kind of,
okay,
you know,
yeah.
make a room. You know?
Yeah.
Hang a wall.
Okay, I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah. So that room, that living room with the fuchsia carpet was where I really dug up the first album. And that was late 95, 96, 97. All the while, Hope Factory is happening. All the while, the Mr. Jones thing is happening. I wrote a lot for Mr. Jones. The Mr. Jones stuff that I was writing was sort of like distinctly like my other stuff. I was keeping my favorites and like
just
stuff I didn't know what to do with. I was cultivating for the Mr. Jones thing. And the Mr. Jones people took that album, got a $1 million record deal, and cut me out of it.
Wow.
That's the short story. It took me about 9 months to record it. I was working at a printer repair place on Long Island, and every day at the end of work at 6 o'clock, I would jump in my Mazda and drive into Manhattan on 28th Street and record until 2 o'clock in the morning, go back to Queens, sleep, and repeat. For like 9 months, I did that.
And then they sold the album?
And then they took the album somewhere, and I was like, they wouldn't call me back. So that was the first time I had to get a little heavy with somebody on the like lawyerly, like sort of.
Sure, because you're on the recording.
Yeah, and they wound up having to pay me. They paid me $10,000, and I bailed.
Wow.
Because I didn't want to talk to them anymore. I thought they were scumbags. So I cut out of that, and with that $10,000 and with another little bit of money that I got from the publishing on that deal, I bought the first set of multi-track digital recorders for album 1.
Wow.
And some decent preamps, and started working on it.
So did you record the first Wheatus record pretty much yourself?
Yeah,
then?
it started on a 4-track, 95, 96. End of 96, beginning 97, I bought the digital gear, the first incarnation of the digital gear. Recorded it like twice on the digital gear. Tweaks all along the way, trying to figure out what the sound was.
Yeah. And you played everything on it then?
No. Initially, the first wave of it was me and a drum machine and a bass.
Okay.
So that was the 4-track demo stuff. And then after that, for a short time, the bass player and the drummer from my hardcore band were sort of mildly involved, but the drummer wanted to be a model, and he was like off in L.A. for an indefinite amount of time. So I got my brother in on the drums, who was more consistent, and he wanted to do it. And my brother and the first bass player, Rich Leegee, from the old hardcore band, they wound up being the ones who recorded the album. We also got the record deal. So it was like 1999. About the middle of 99, we were starting to get approached because we were playing like the Mercury Lounge and the Luna Lounge down in New York City, and there was like line around the block.
Whoa, so yeah, so
people heard Teenage Dirtbag. They heard us playing Teenage Dirtbag, and they were like, "This is a song! Oh my God, this band!"
Wow.
So
you had that. You had the record like ready. You had that song was just already massive before.
We were giving away. There are early Apogee Gold CDs that have my own Sharpie handwriting on it. It says Teenage Dirtbag and Friends.
Wow.
And we were giving those away starting in like late 97, 98 at shows in the city.
So people in New York already knew that song before it really broke.
Yeah, and I was working at the time. I changed jobs after the Mr. Jones debacle. I switched jobs to another place, and I wanted to. I was working at a place called ASI, which was a virtual private network company up in Times Square.
Not the White Glove guys.
No, these guys got their hands dirty, and. They saw that I was in a band, the two guys that ran the place, and they were really into Rush, and so was I, and they were like, man, music is software now, right? This is 1998.
Wow.
And they're like, we had our like Netscape internet.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, and I understand it. And they're like, no, I don't think you do. Like, they're gonna have to change how they do all the rights because it's no longer like depreciating copies. It's perfect copies. And when a company sells a CD, they're selling a piece of software that doesn't have any protection. They haven't figured that out yet. You should watch out for your digital rights. Get your website and everything. So I did.
Wow.
I got Wheatus.com, and I got the digital rights all secured with BMI like in 1998.
Wow.
And it was their advice. There's kind of like their warning to me, like,
Yeah.
watch out, man. Music's going to be free.
That's
Couple years.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and they were like really, really smart computer engineers. They knew what the hell they were doing.
Yeah, they knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, they built like what was that network called? Oh man, I'll never remember the name of it. Anyway, they worked on this software that was like, you know, at the time was like cutting edge networking software. So the short story is that I came to the game with my own band a little bit over-prepared. And when Sony and a couple of other record labels was talking to us, I was like, honestly, guys, I'm not interested. Music's going to be free. You know, we're giving away our own CDs and people are going to buy tickets and stuff.
Yeah.
And that freaked the companies out. So Sony came, Columbia Records came, and they were like, okay, you can produce your own record. You can do whatever you want. We'll leave you alone. We're going to give you advance. And I wanted the money because I wanted more gear. I wanted a studio with two EQs and compressors and stuff. And so we signed a deal memo in late '99
To Columbia?
to Columbia Records.
Yeah. And so you said, and they just got word because of all the shows that you guys were playing.
It was really just like
the buzz of the band.
What had started as a friend network had become a buzz.
Wow.
Of people we didn't know at the shows singing Teenage Dirtbag. Like, it was crazy. It was weird. It was an interesting time.
How, like, because your parents were musicians and you have your brother in the band, like, how were they, like, huge advocates of this?
My dad was still saying things like, keep a backup plan. Because that's all he knew. He didn't know anything else. He didn't know what else to say to me.
Yeah.
You know, had he been an entertainment lawyer, he may have had better advice.
Right.
But he wasn't. So he sold cars, you know. That was his job. Yeah, my mom was an interior decorator.
Okay.
They both worked when I was a kid, like full time. So it was like, you know, they were just working class people trying to keep their mortgage payments. They had no idea what I'd gotten myself into, nor could they help. So.
Yeah, now you're signed to a major label, and
right
from there, like, Teenage Dirtbag, like, this is the first record that you guys put out, and this song is massive.
Not at first.
It was, but I mean, you had videos.
It came out
on the radio.
So it all looks like that now with 150 million YouTube plays.
Yeah.
But in the summer of 2000, Columbia Records was like, I don't know, it didn't test that well at alternative rock radio, man.
Really?
Yeah, fully. Like, we were like worried. Everyone was worried. Everyone was like, oh boy.
Okay.
You know? And it was a combination of, like, I think the wrong people over there were trying to sell it. You know, and we were an eclectic New York rock band. I tried to explain that we were somewhere between Metallica and the Talking Heads. And nobody understood what I was talking about because, if you recall, the summer of 2000 was kind of like bro rock.
Oh yeah.
Like there was
like Warped Tour bands.
Yeah, right on the edge of like Disturbed and like like
the new metal.
The third wave of new metal grungy kind of like Korn was really popular and like I actually like Korn, but my only point is that
you guys didn't sound like
we
Korn.
didn't fit into that stylistically. We didn't fit into that stuff. So I was playing an acoustic guitar. We were this sort of like New York band, and they were like, "No, SoCal punk, man, SoCal punk. You got to like Green Day, like SoCal punk." And I was like, "That's not where our roots lie, man. Like I like LL Cool J and Metallica, man, not SoCal punk, you know." And there was a real misunderstanding. We missed each other on the aesthetic, and on the artistic goals. And they were constantly, like, Sony people were like, oh, you know, we got to get you in leather pants and a pirate shirt with a Les Paul and blah, blah. And I was like, go fuck yourself. That will never happen. Give it up. And I got, you know, 'cause I can be pretty ornery. Like, if I know somebody's really wrong about me, it's hard for me to sit there and try and explain myself. Like,
you weren't just going to conform to whatever they were
I would
kinda
say
trying
things to Sony people in meetings along the lines of, I think it's best if you don't work on our record. You know? And they didn't like that. They didn't like that. Wasn't a nice thing to say.
Yeah.
So,
well, did they put you, like, once the record came out and Teenage Dirtbag's out, and
we go on tour with Zebrahead, who are also Columbia artists.
So they put you on tour.
Yeah, they put us. That was the first tour support, right? Mm-hmm. So we did tour support for 3 months, and I realized how dangerous that was because they were. No, I'm sorry. We were on tour support for a month with Zebrahead.
And is this a U.S. tour?
One month of U.S. tour with Zebrahead on a hockey bus with 21 people on it.
Wow.
And learned a lot from those guys. Those guys work hard, but it would be a lie to say that the crowds were compatible.
Sure.
Their kind of crowd was like up front with their back to us with the middle finger, like during the set, like most nights. And
was that kind of ego crushing then?
No, it was like I don't there's ego, like I just wanted to fight that kid. You know? like it wasn't like that. It was like what are we doing here wasting our fucking time? Like I was getting impatient about it.
Okay,
you know?
yeah.
And I kind of knew that there was another audience out there for us that we were not reaching. Mm-hmm. So, and again, this is the whole like Zebrahead, great band, SoCal punk.
Yeah.
Not what we were ever going to be about.
Yeah.
You know, so it was tough in that regard. We needed to be on tour with a band like Cake or Primus or something a little bit more eclectic and fucking weird. And Weezer would have been a good choice. But they at the time were, I think, in a hiatus of some kind. Okay. But anyway, so the short story is that we finally wound up on the tour with Eve Six and Harvey Danger and those types of bands. And the second and third month of touring, even though it kind of really fizzled out for us in the States, they were more appropriate in terms of like who we were on the bill with. But it was a little too late because the fire had come and gone. Okay. Sony had stopped really pushing the record after October.
Oh, so they weren't backing it.
They were
much.
done with it.
Yeah,
I remember the conversation. They were like, "Well, our first week of sales, you know, we failed to break the psychological barrier of 20,000 units shipped." And I was like, "Well, what did we do?" They're like 19,784. And I was like,
you missed it by like 20 records.
I was like, "Well, I said, do we have any numbers for Napster or LimeWire?" And they were like, "What's that?"
Oh,
so I was like, "Wow, man! Like, we're not gonna."
So you kind of knew at that point, like...
At that point, I was like, Jesus, there's no one to talk to at this label about how to do this.
Sure.
That scared me. Because it was like, multinational media corporation...
doesn't have a clue what's
they
can't do that.
They're not ready to do this. And then I was like, the guys at ASI were right, man. You should have never signed a fucking record deal. These companies don't know what they're selling anymore. Wow. So...
did you have a multi-album deal?
We had
with
a 6-album contract.
Whoa.
So, they stopped calling us back. Thanksgiving comes, end of November. Day after Thanksgiving, our A&R guy calls me. He's like, you got to go to Australia. I'm like, I have pneumonia. I have 4 more shows. One of them is in Lawrence, Kansas. And I'm not going to Australia. I'm going home for Christmas, and I'm going to get healthy again. And he's like, no, you don't understand. The single's blowing up in Australia. And I was like, click. Like, fuck you. I don't believe any of this shit. You people don't know what you're doing. 3 days later, he calls me back. You have to go to Australia. And I'm like, why? Why do I have to fly 27 hours to Australia?
Right.
Tell me what the fuck. He's like, it's #1.
Wow.
I'm like, what do you mean it's #1 on what? On what? The fucking like indie rock chart, college charts? He's like, no. Nationwide sales.
Wow.
Teenage Dirtbag is the #1 selling single in the country. And still, I'm like, what is there, fucking 20 million people in Australia? I was like, God damn it, like looking for any excuse to go home, really.
Right.
And he's like, you are gonna go down there and go on TV, man. Come on, like do this. Something else could happen.
Yeah.
And I was like, fine. So we go down there and we're on all this television and like it's blowing up, and like it's the #1 song in the country for a month, and it goes quadruple platinum.
Wow.
And by Christmas, we were like the Christmas single down there. Like, so it happened really fast. It was in like 2 weeks later. Everything was.
Was
like,
that overwhelming to you guys? Like coming,
Yeah.
especially since you weren't getting the support here in the United States. You go there and it's like, it's this whole big
Yes, and we had
thing.
conversations about, can we have a career in Australia only?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Maybe. Well, how do we do it, you know?
Yeah.
So, again, we knew very few people in the music industry in New York, and we didn't know anyone. And it was just,
in
and
Australia.
again, it almost started immediately. Like, the Sony guy was like, you guys are a little, unkempt. Like, can we get you in some, like, silky shirts and like get some makeup on these, get a stylist in here? And I'm like, the fucking name of the song is Dirtbag. Like, what are you talking? Do you even know what you're selling here? So it was a lot of like, it was still like right up against the same culture, even though what we had done was #1. They were like, no, you got to clean up, And I was like, I'm not cleaning up. Nobody in this band's cleaning up. So we left Australia, went home for January, and at the end of January, he calls me again. He's like, it's happening in England. And I was like, what's happening in England? And he's like, it's Blair McDonald, the head of Sony in England. He's, hey, there's Mike Doty. Hi, Mike Doty. He's like, Blair McDonald's the president of the company over there. He really believes in this. There's a new television station called The Box. They do all call-in requests. Teenage Dirtbag is beginning to test really well. They haven't aired it yet, but they think it's going to shoot to #1 as soon as they do. And I was like, call me back when it shoots to #1. Not because I was just a cynic.
Yeah.
Because
of
these
course.
guys were, that wasn't the only smoke that they'd try to blow up my ass before.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like, the stuff that they try to pull on me in the States, oh, man, if you just sing this, like, weird version of Teenage Dirtbag for this radio station in Albuquerque, in Portland, they're going to add your single, and it's going to be great. You're going to blow up nationwide. And the bullshit just never stopped, And I found out later, like, it was also that Evan and Jaron could get added in Boston,
Right.
So it's like, it's always this conspiracy of, like, dunces, like, trying to maneuver themselves in their relationships. And I got to the point where I was like, this is not good for my music. It's not good for me. I'm not talking to you people anymore.
Okay.
So that's why I was such a cynic.
Yeah.
And it turned out that the way that they do things in England was quite different.
Okay.
That they don't bother calling artists that they're not going to do something with.
Yeah.
And at the point at which they were getting very serious about it, I should have been too, because that meant something. But I couldn't know,
Yeah, you would have no idea.
Right. So in the middle of February, Teenage Dirtbag debuts. I think it was February. It might have been March. Debuts on The Box and shoots right to #1.
Whoa.
And then they get the full machinery of the single delivery system in England moving.
Okay.
Which is a thing unto itself. It involves the BBC, Radio 1, these relationships that are ancient.
Yeah, because it's all run through the BBC.
It's all very consolidated. And if you're going to have a #1 hit in England, you really have to pass through a gauntlet of...
Especially a band from the States, I would assume.
Band from the States. They're not really keen on doing that with it, unless it's Michael Jackson or something that they really know is already a classic.
It's going to be massive.
Yeah, Mariah Carey, Madonna, they do that with, but they just didn't do that with, new bands from the States didn't break into the top 5 in the UK.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing. So, short story is they got the whole machine moving, and the Teenage Dirtbag single broke into #2 at the top of the charts there. It wasn't a #1 because of a band called Atomic Kitten, and they beat us by 300 albums or something.
Wow.
So it was really close, and it was all of a sudden we were being invited to play for Prince Charles.
Jeez.
And all this kind of next level shit that none of us were ready for. But I had already become very sort of protective of the band because of what the American company had put us through in the States. It was really bad. It was really bad. So I was kind of
But when you came back, were they?
No.
They.
No,
I'm sure it helped their album
They weren't
sales.
sorry, we made a mistake.
They didn't.
No. No, if anything, I remember having a conversation with an executive who said, I got to get you back over here, re-sing this second single. And I was like, what? He's like, I know what went wrong in the States. You sing too much like a girl. You got to drop a few octaves. You know, everything is like, you know, Creed and like all this stuff is on the radio. You got to sing like a man. And I was like, do you like the way I sing, man? What do you think of it? He's like, I'm behind you 100%, kid. I was like, good, let's leave it there then. You know, I was like, I'm not coming back to sing a different version of the record because you fucked up the first time.
Right.
You know, come on. So that was when we were way off tour support, constantly at odds with a label who was trying, like, when you have a hit, like, everybody comes in and they kind of like try and claim their own little piece of responsibility for it. And man, do they throw the ideas that come at you are just like, what? Like remixes. Everybody's cousin's brother needed to do a remix of something. And I was like, who's this? What does he do? Why are we doing this? Like, what's wrong with the original, you know? And it just, people smell blood. Like, and they're just like, they was all over it. We sat down with the London Times music critic in a press junket one time, and she goes, right, so who produced your record for real? Who really did it? So, like, I was like, we did, man. We did it in my mom's basement. I've been re-recording that album for, like, a half a decade, you know? Like, why are you saying this to me? You know? And it just, like, if anything, it sort of cemented the whole protect yourself from these people vibe. Mm-hmm. And because I like playing clubs. Yeah. That's where I go. That's the thing. I can do something over in that corner. Sure. That I find very comforting and meaningful. Uh-huh. And what they wanted me to do, the version of that was at the end of it wasn't certain or good enough to do than what they wanted.
They wanted it more. They wanted
the dumbest shit. They just wanted to they wanted to rewrite your life.
Okay.
That's really what it was.
Yeah.
And when I said stuff like, they were like, what's Teenage Dirtbag about? I was like, oh, there's a satanic murder in my town when I was 10 years old. And I was like, they're not talking about that. Yeah, it's like, why not? Like, that's what you want to know what a dirtbag is? You know? So, I mean, it was a mismatch. And I used pop aesthetic in my production.
Yeah, because it's very catchy.
I like to rap like nasty little messages in candy wrappers. You know? And they didn't understand that. There was no room for that in their thing. They're like, you're either a pop artist or you're like something else. We don't know what to do with something else.
Yeah.
So we got out of there. We delivered our second record. They hated it. They refused to release it in America. There was a whole bunch of other stuff they didn't want to do. And the short story is that during this meeting, I was listening to them tell us, give us this laundry list of we're not. And I was like, well, if you're not going to do this with us anymore, I should probably go get my day job. When they asked me what I thought of that.
Yeah.
And they got pissed. The president at the time of Columbia Records was like, well, if you feel that way, you can take your damn record. You can get the hell out of here. And my lawyer from across the table was like, don't say another word. We're taking them up on that.
Yeah. So you were able to
got out of our 6-album deal.
Wow.
With our second record. We walked with it.
And your second record is you brought your sister onto that.
Sister was involved in the band from the first record, but was finally on the road with us by the second.
That's so that's really cool. That must have been a kind of a cool experience.
It was.
It was. To have your brother and your sister, together with you.
Yeah,
this on.
It was comforting. We were much harder to fuck with.
Yeah, you have a family affair. Now
yeah, because we would have silent communication about people in the room. And, but at that point we were independent, and the single that I delivered from the second record, Lemonade, just clicked over to 1 million plays on Spotify this week.
Wow! Congratulations.
So
that's amazing.
So and it hasn't done anything. You can start rolling stuff in. Am I holding it up? Is everything okay out there? Oh God. Yeah.
Are we keeping you too long?
No, I've just realized you have questions, and I've just been yammering.
Actually, you're going through my entire list of stuff here.
Good.
Those are just reference notes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the general story of how we became signed and then independent.
Yeah.
That's it. And we've been doing the same independent thing ever since.
So once the second record, you had the second record recorded and done, they wouldn't push it.
No, they wanted nothing to do with it. I think they printed up 2,000 copies of that record and released it on the wrong date. They put it out on a date that the poster said was like a week later. Like,
Oh my
yeah, they
gosh.
fucked up. They fucked up so bad. They couldn't have cared less. and it was like, okay, if you don't care, you don't care, we don't care about you. Let's move on.
See you later. And so then your next record, you put out Yourself Again, and that was Too Soon Monsoon.
Right.
And with that album, you went the route of the online.
Yes.
Deal,
So
'cause
that
that's
was
where you that's where you did like a pay.
well. So that
what you
was the
want.
early like nobody knew how to get a record on iTunes.
Okay.
iTunes came out the year before,
Wow.
2004, and nobody knew how to do it. Like there were some people who knew how to do it clearly,
Yeah.
but it was confused. It was like, oh, we got to sign a distribution deal with an independent label that has what is this? You know, like, and then eventually 3 years later, TuneCore hit the 2006 or so. TuneCore happened.
Yeah.
And we just started distributing through TuneCore.
Okay.
So, yeah, and ever since then, it's like relatively decent little independent revenue stream that keeps us out of the red. Sometimes.
It keeps you doing what you love.
Exactly.
And I want to talk to you a little bit about the video you did for Real Girl, because that was
I shot that myself.
yeah,
with
you
the
shot
handheld
it,
little camera. Yeah.
you directed it, you wrote it, like
I just had
what
this
was
weird little idea. These two best friends from Texas were like really into our music, and they wanted to be a part of it in some way. And so I kind of wrote the script for them. These androgynous characters who kind of are separated and then meet again. It was a really simple little story, and we did whatever we could with what we had at the time.
Yeah.
You know, which was nothing. We had less than zero budget for that. It was ridiculous. It was so cheap.
Have you directed or shot anything since then? As far as
I've tried
music
not
videos?
to. I mean, the animated video for Lemonade that Oliver did, I wrote the script for it,
Okay.
and I wrote the edit notes for it that he kind of followed. I can do a narrative arc pretty easily, but when I have to also get into the technology of setting up a shot and stuff, it kind of
yeah.
gets like a little overwhelming.
Okay.
I am not a movie director.
Okay.
I operate in the sound world like that
Sure.
very easily, but movie direction is fucking nuts. And video direction is even crazier because you have to tell this tiny little, big arc in a tiny little space.
In a couple minutes.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It has to kind of make sense with the with the song. So I just have two more questions for you. One being, you wrote music for the film April Showers, and how did you get involved with that project?
He reached out to me directly, and we had lots of long conversations about how Teenage Dirtbag having the kid with the gun in school,
Yeah.
and it came out a year after the Columbine shooting,
Sure.
and he was there. You know, he was in the
yeah,
height.
he was in it.
Yeah, so he reached out to me as a sort of like direct, like, you might get how to do this.
Okay.
And so I wrote this. I scored our song Now to the film. He gave me the scene that he wanted me to score it to, and it was like so dark, man. It was like watching a suicide like 40 times in a row just to try and get the feel of the shot and how it moves and what kind of music it needs and where the beats are and everything. And it was just like, at the end of that session, it took me about 3 days. I looked at our bass player Matthew and I was like, "Can we hire a clown, please?" or something.
Oh, man.
Like what? Like, this is just holy shit. Like, this just beats you to down. So I scored that. And we got that song from it. Yeah,
That's amazing. I mean, I'm sure it took you even back to as a kid that
dude.
all
I
that
wouldn't do it
happening.
again.
Yeah,
I wouldn't do it again.
that happened.
It's a chapter. It's
You
documented.
did it, and you're done with it.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go to a little bit more positive note here, and before we wrap this up. But
Now the cops are getting here.
yeah, they heard about us. So you worked with a couple of guys from One Direction recently.
Yeah, man.
recently.
Josh Devine. He was just
Yeah.
texting me this morning. Actually.
Wow. So how did you get involved with them?
So they covered Teenage Dirtbag in 2013 and 14 on their tour.
And I was going to ask you about that too. Like, how did you know that they were doing that? Or
I
just get
did.
wind of it?
Well, I was in a club in New York watching I Fight Dragons and MC Lars. I was at a really good show, and I was like really enjoying it. And I pulled my phone out in between bands, and it was like Twitter feed. Never the
endless.
notifications never ended.
Yeah,
I was like, what happened? Oh my god, did one of our original members die or something? Like I really got like worried. And then I checked the trending topics, and Wheatus and Teenage Dirtbag were like in the top 5 worldwide trending topics.
That's crazy.
And it was because that very night, just down the block at Madison Square Garden, One Direction were playing Teenage Dirtbag.
That's so crazy.
And I didn't know it was going to happen, and I was totally taken by surprise. And the drummer Josh, he reached out to me on Twitter, and we hooked up and wrote a few songs with him and put out a single.
Yeah, the Only You.
Only You. Only You is a true story about it was 2015. Because they covered our song, we started playing What Makes You Beautiful.
Oh, really?
During our sets.
That's awesome.
And some old fucking gnarly wannabe punk asshole from England attacked me while we were playing it. Jumped on the stage and grabbed me and like tried to pull me off the stage and stuff. And
just because you were doing a One Direction song, or just because you?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So, what sucked was security got him, and he had like the stage was like this, and he was wrapped around my ankle. And I couldn't get my ankle was like this against the stage. Oh. Security were trying to do their best, but they weren't really aware of how to handle the situation, so they piled on top of him.
Oh.
And I was like, I'm still pretty flexible, but I was like, don't keep jumping on top of him like he's on top. I'm screaming in their ears like he's on my ankle. Pick his head up so I can punch him. And so there's 3 guys trying to grab onto this greasy green mohawk, right?
Oh my god!
And it's got like olive oil in it or something. And none of us can get a grip. None of us can grip his hair to get him up off the floor. Because I really could have laid into him.
Yeah.
And we couldn't hit him. Nobody could hit him because he was greasy. You know, he was just a slimy little rodent. So that attack is the subject matter for Only You and the video.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, man, so much for doing this. This has been an absolute pleasure. The one final question I have for you is, we kind of went through, how you became, a kid from New York's, and then now you're in Wheatus, and you've done so many amazing things throughout the course of the past few decades. Do you have any advice for aspiring artists?
Well, I'm always reluctant to do that, other than to say you have to cut. Just like your music is original, and just like you have to find your own voice, you have to find your own business model too. Mm-hmm. What worked for me, I can't guarantee is solve problems for other people.
Sure.
So I would say the only thing that's really truly benefited me is I've learned how every single thing works. I know what she's talking about when she's having trouble getting the rider together. I know how to fix the trailer wheels if they come off. I know how to mount one of the wheels on our cases if it's broken off by a freighting company. I know how to wire a pickup. I know how to solder. I know how to all the shit that anything that can go wrong. Learn how to do it.
You're gonna have to learn how.
You're gonna learn one way or the other. Learn how to do it. Be interested in what's under the hood and figure it out, because you have a precious few number of shows, performances that you can do for people in your lifetime, and the only way to really guarantee that they're going to go well and that everyone's going to be happy about it is if you know how every part of the show works to some extent, and you can be a part of it to get it right. That's helped me.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I think that's all very, very true, because if you're somewhere and something breaks down, you're the only
you know
advocate.
how to use this thing, right?
Yeah.
Like
kind of.
But you know what I'm saying?
Well,
like
it is still working.
If you didn't, it'd be a little
if it was
problem.
if it had a malfunction, then I'd have to figure out how to fix it.
Exactly.
And then
Exactly.
we would be here, and you'd be like, "What the hell is this guy doing? Doesn't know how to work his equipment."
Yeah. Learn how to get through Donner Pass so you don't have to eat your friends.